Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to be here.
I starting the recording. Yeah, no, it's good to see you. I've seen you on stage and on my screen multiple times, and now thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.
I was in Estonia last year, so
Oh,
that's
was
in
that for the Mind Valley event?
Mind Valley University.
Good job. That was fun. That was fun.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. And yeah, before we start, I mean, I talked, of course, to your colleague, but maybe I can give a brief intro of myself. Is that helpful?
Sure.
So my name is Jasper. I'm from the Netherlands, and I've been very entrepreneurial in a wide range of fields, from travel to co-working to podcasting. And 2 years ago, I left Amsterdam for a big adventure. So for the past 2 years, I've been on a road trip, exploring different cultures, spirituality, living in different communities, and also doing a lot of personal growth work. And with Soul Kitchen, I want to, interview people that inspire me for a wide range of reasons. And I also want to host retreats at some point, but that's kind of my next step. And what I liked about you is your variety of activities. And I've taken the Wild Fit course, and I've attended your public speaking lecture. And I think public speaking is so important. But yeah, I want to learn more about it myself. And I'm sure also other people want to learn more about it. So that's a little bit my introduction.
Cool.
And before we start, is there anything you want to share with me, or before we go into it?
My only, I just typically my favorite kind of interviews are just conversational. I'll follow your lead, and let's see where it takes us.
Okay, that's excellent. Well, let's start then. So, welcome friends to a new episode of the Soul Kitchen. Today, I'm talking with Edmeades, who is a entrepreneur and a teacher in the field of public speaking and personal growth. I met him on my screen because I was a Mind Valley student, and I've taken a Wild Fit course on how you can improve your relationship with food, how you can improve your health and your fitness. And I've also seen him on stage at Mind Valley University, where he talked about public speaking. And today I want to know everything about public speaking, how he got into it, and what we can learn about it. So it's great to see you today. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's really good to be here, and I've just been on. I was just back in Estonia now for a few weeks, and I'm very glad to be home.
Were you doing a academy there?
No, I actually was just there for family, Christmas vacation, that kind of stuff. It was just 2 weeks of snow and Christmas.
Excellent. Because do you live in Estonia or do you live somewhere else?
Well, really the Dominican Republic is my sort of home, but we keep a place in Tallinn as well.
I see. So you have two places.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm really curious in, you're active in the field of public speaking, but how did you get into this field? And maybe you can share a bit about your background and your adventure so far.
It is an interesting question because there isn't really one answer. It's not like it's not like there was this one moment where it happened. The truth is that as a kid, I was really terrified of public speaking, like really phobic of it. And then one day I was working in a sales job, and we were doing direct sales, like knocking on doors and selling to people in their houses. And it was Canada, so it was cold. And then one day my boss offered me the chance to get involved in recruiting. And what that meant was that, we would run ads in the local papers every Monday. And then I would take all these calls from people on the Monday, and I would book them in for a group interview on Tuesday. And so there would be between 50 and 100 people that would come in on a Tuesday, and I would have to do this big presentation for them. And then I would choose about half of them, and then I would spend the rest of the week training them. And when I agreed to take this job, I didn't really think about the fact that it involved public speaking. So it was horrible. Like, it was really horrible, but I had to do it every single week, like again and again and again. And of course, as I was doing that, I was, developing skills and learning what worked and what didn't work and so on. And so I think in a sense, that was my first real, stepping into public speaking, but it would still be maybe, 20 years later before I would overcome my fears and actually become a speaker.
Mm. And so it took you 20 years. And is public speaking something that someone taught you in some education system, or is it missing?
Well, I think it's completely missing from just about every education system. I think that you know, people that are graduating now from, say, university, they might be learning a lot of really great academic information, but if they aren't taught proper rhetoric, if they aren't schooled in debate technique and how to put together a presentation, and this is the hard part, is that many times our school system not only doesn't teach public speaking, but it actually makes public speaking harder and scarier than it needs to be. So many people enter school perfectly capable of communicating. They leave school educated and terrified of communicating. And I don't think that's ideal.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that could be a specific kind of class at school, but it's not.
Yeah.
I'm curious, in your career, you've worked in Hollywood, you've worked in military research, you've worked in medical advices. Was public speaking important in each of these fields, or it has been more important in some more than others?
Well, I would say this, that public speaking is important in at least I believe, in just about any field that you would go into. So there are some of my careers that I was involved in, say, before I learned to public speak, and didn't then use it. And I think I could have been significantly more successful. So for example, in my first business, we sold mobile computing and wireless networking technologies and that kind of stuff. But I would never think to go speak at a conference or, you know, put on an education event or something like that. And as successful as that business was, I now feel that business could have been 5 or 10 times more successful if I had been really comfortable and effective at public speaking. But then after that, I mean, every single business I've been involved with, every single role that I've undertaken has either come about because of my public speaking and or been magnified because I had become comfortable and competent at presenting.
I see. And yeah, if you talk about fears that you have to overcome, if I look at myself, I have a lot of experience in facilitating groups. I have experience in interviewing, and I'm attracted by public speakers, but I haven't done it a lot yet. So my comfort zone is this facilitation. So I got triggered by your the fact that you said you're one talk away from accelerating your career. And it triggered me to think, like, what's that one talk for me? But I still have a bit of a fear kind of to choose the topic or to really step into it. I stay a bit in my comfort zone of facilitation. So can you share a bit about the concept of the one talk away and fears that people like myself might have to go there?
Sure. So what I realized as I look back over my life is that there were individual talks that I gave that caused a significant upgrade in the opportunities around me. So, for example, when I first got involved in speaking, I was mostly speaking about health because that was a passion of mine. And then one day I was invited by an organization to come and do a talk in London, England. I was living in the west of England at the time. And I got there and I thought that I was there to speak about health. But it turned out they really wanted me to speak about business. All that happened was that I had my tech company and I sold it, and they wanted me to come and tell the story about how I started in my living room and grew it over the period of time and then sold it. And I was like, I wasn't prepared for that talk at all because I thought I was there to talk about health. And so I ended up doing the talk, and it went so very well that at the end they said that there'd be like 15 minutes of Q&A with the audience, but that 15 minutes turned into more than an hour. And I was just answering all these questions, and I realized how much fun I had doing it. But more than that, something magical happened. And that is that I, first of all, realized how much I enjoyed it. For example, somebody would ask me a question that they had a lot of pain or stress about. And I could see that when I gave them the answer, their stress evaporated. Like, it was like now they had a solution. And it was like, not just, I'd done lots of mentoring, so I knew that feeling. But now it was mentoring like 80 people at one time. And it was so rewarding. And then also a guy walked up to me at that talk and he said, hey, could you deliver that same talk in Singapore next week? Well, first of all, I didn't plan the damn talk and I don't even remember what I said, but sure, I'll figure it out. And off to Singapore I went. And so that one talk launched my business speaking career. And it was just one talk delivered at the right time, the right way. And it just expanded everything. And I've had a few of those in my life. And so I believe that no matter what somebody's job, career, or business is, they are only ever one well-constructed constructed, one well-delivered talk away from a major upgrade, a major breakthrough in their business. Maybe it's about raising money, maybe it's about selling more product or licensing deals, or maybe it's, there's any number, a book deal, movie deal. There's countless stories of people who have delivered one talk that changed their whole life. Simon Sinek, Brené Brown, even Barack Obama. His wife says in her book that there was one talk that he gave when he was involved in state level politics in Chicago and Illinois. And he gave one talk, and that talk got the press asking him different questions. They started asking him about national policy. And the way she puts it in her book, it's like that one talk was the reason he became president. One talk.
Yeah,
of course, many things had to follow, but that one talk opened the doors.
Yeah. And how do you start, if you want to define what that one talk is about? Like, where do my inner reflections start?
Well, the ultimate talk begins with your own passion, your own excitement, your own mission. That's where that is. So for example, when I gave that one talk on business, I'd kind of forgotten about my passion for startups and such, because I'd sold my business and I wasn't really in it anymore. But as I was telling the story, it brought back the memories, it brought back the emotion. And because I delivered that talk with like real authentic vulnerability, like just me exploring my own memories, it was very attractive for the audience. So the thing is that a lot of people, when they hear from me that they're one talk away, they start going out there and going, well, what is the one talk that I could deliver that would change the whole thing? Like, well, no, what is the one talk that is inside of you that lights you on fire, that you feel needs to be out in the world? And that talk is probably the one. And if you're very lucky, then that talk you want to deliver happens to be topical or happens to be in sync with what's going on in society in that moment. So for example, when I started, I did a talk once about evolutionary biology and the underpinning of biohacking and health and all that kind of stuff. I did this talk about 10 years ago. And there was a man in the room who happens to be the founder of Mind Valley. And he saw that talk. And all of a sudden he's like, wow, we got to put your program on the Mind Valley platform. And because of that, now tens of thousands of people around the world have gone through that program that wouldn't have been introduced to it if it wasn't for him.
Yeah, so one thing leads to the other, right? So I've worked a lot with social entrepreneurs with an organization called the Impact Hub, helping them with business strategy. And I was in Costa Rica recently at a conference where I'm now, and I met a university professor from Japan. And we started talking about social entrepreneurship. And then he said, oh, I want you to do a video lecture for my students. So now I'm going to be a guest lecturer at Okoyama University in Japan.
Oh,
so that for me is a starting point. Well, talking about passion. So I'm working with one entrepreneur. His name is Tim, and he wants to make transport more sustainable. So he wants to replace plane travel partly by train travel.
Yeah.
And he recently joined your Speakers Academy in Tallinn, I think with 40 or 50 people.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what do you do with people when they join your academy? If you can share anything about it.
Well, the core process of the academy is not so much about teaching public speaking. It's about unleashing the communicator that's already inside you. And this is a very important distinction because, look, if you want to become a professional golfer, well, we're both probably a little too old for that now. Of course, there is the senior tour. So maybe we could say, look, let's go play the senior tour. Well, how good a golfer are you now? Then you figure out, I need a good coach, I need a good caddy, and I'm going to go have to practice 6, 7, 8 hours a day, every single day for the next 10 years. And then maybe then I could get myself onto the senior tour, maybe. But you see, the reason is that ultimately with learning golf, you're having to teach your body a series of unnatural movements. You're having to teach your body a series of things that are not hard-coded already into the DNA of humans. So you've got to learn all this stuff, and then you got to practice it, and you got to develop the neurology or muscle memory to make it happen. On the other hand, public speaking is something that is both instinctual and hardwired. It's already inside people. In fact, what happens is that for most of us, as a result of parents making the odd unconscious comment and teacher and an education system that doesn't really understand meaning generation. And so what ends up happening is that children that are very comfortable communicators at 2 and 3 years old, by the time they get to 5 and 6 and 7 years old, they start displaying signs of shyness or signs of fear of public speaking. And then that just gets worse and worse and worse. So what I'm saying is that the skill is already inside. Over the course of my speaking academy, my goal is to unleash that. It's to it's to help dissolve the ego shield that stops someone from being a really truly vulnerable speaker. And then of course, we also do teach them skills and strategies that help them develop to a world-class level. But the transformation level at that event is unlike anything I've seen. It's really powerful. In fact, at the event you're talking about now in Tallinn, we had a number of finalists. We do a big public event at the end, and there's a live audience, and we're live streaming it all over the world. And the feedback from the audience was, because we had 15 finalists, the feedback from the audience was, well, I've never been to a conference ever in my life where all 15 presenters held my attention, ever, until now. And here's what they don't know, the people watching, is they haven't been there for the last 5 days. So many of them assume that these were already professional speakers when they showed up. No, in fact, 3 of them, I had to do phobia interventions with them because they were so terrified 5 days ago. And now they're delivering from the heart. So that's what that program's about. And it's a serious privilege to deliver it.
That's amazing. And you touch on the theme delivering from the heart, which I know is powerful when you're a speaker. But how do you access that, or what are some of the pitfalls of not speaking from your heart?
Well, in my opinion, humans have a natural instinct, and that natural instinct is to be attracted to authenticity. And that instinct is so strong that you would rather have an authentic enemy than an inauthentic friend. It's a very important thing to understand. You see, the thing is that an authentic enemy is predictable, because when somebody is true to themselves, then once you've watched them long enough, you know how they act, and the authenticity in a sense creates certainty for you. But if you have an inauthentic friend, what that means is they're unpredictable. It means you don't know when they're going to let you down. You don't know when they're going to hurt you, or maybe if they're even actually a secret enemy. So if somebody walks on stage and they deliver not from the heart, they deliver with a lack of authenticity, they deliver without that layer, then the audience automatically picks up that they're they're acting, that they're putting on a personality, and that makes them inauthentic, and that makes them unattractive.
I understand. So the audience can kind of pick up on that. They can sense that. And talking about the audience, when I listened to your performance in Tallinn, you mentioned that people have different ways of picking up on communication. So some are more sound focused, some are more verbal focused. I forgot exactly what you mentioned, but can you remember me what these differences are about?
Sure. This is a commonly discussed thing in neurolinguistics and in psychology, and generally in communication, advertising, marketing, anywhere where people are concerned with having a good communication connection. So the general idea is that there are some people who naturally communicate more quickly and more loudly and more easily and what have you. And then there's, at the other end of the spectrum, there's people who are more inclined toward communicating through their sense of feeling. And so they tend to speak, more slowly, and they have longer pauses while they check how they feel about the words they're about to say. And, in the middle, there are people who are more regular in their cadence. They have a more consistent sort of cadence in their delivery, and their tone of voice is more in the average level. And the audience is made up of people all over that spectrum. It's not so simple as to say that there's 3 types of people. It's that all people exist on that spectrum somewhere. Some people are louder, some people are even louder and faster, and some people are quieter, and some people are even more quiet. And so one of the challenges you have as a speaker is recognizing that your audience will have all of those people in the audience. So if you walk on stage and you're like, just like total high energy motivational speaker guy, then yeah, people that are more visual in their communication, that are more naturally loud and more naturally fast, they'll really like the presentation. But the people who like slower, calmer, more deliberate speech, they won't like it. And so as a speaker, you have to learn the skills of voice modulation to maintain a sense of rapport with everyone that's in the room.
I see. So you have to kind of make a combination of elements in your speech. And at the same time, you will work with different audiences, like entrepreneurs, business people, students, politicians. So how do you kind of shape your speech according to these subtle differences in audience?
Well, I think the first thing is you shape it by making sure that your presentation touches touches on each of those ranges. That at times you might be telling a story with a lot of passion and speed and loudness, and then every now and again you might slow right down, create a pause, and give them an opportunity to think. And so that's the first thing, is that voice modulation. Being able to use that. And then the second thing is to use something that you might call sensory acuity, and that is to pay attention to what's going on with the audience, to have a sense of empathetic connection with them. So, for example, if you notice some people picking up their phones to look at Facebook or Instagram or something, or if you notice people like sort of yawning or nodding off, then what that probably tells you is you need to increase the energy a little. And so that might be a good time to like increase your voice and punch more passion into it to reattract those people that you've disengaged with. And so I think those are the main two things to pay attention to. There's a whole skill set about that. But knowing that the audience has people all over that spectrum means that you really should consider using that entire spectrum in your deliveries. And by the way, listen, Jasper, I know you've been through this. I know you went to school, and I know you had teachers that may as well have been hypnotists, because within 10 minutes of their class, you probably felt like falling asleep. And what I can guess is that most of those people spoke like this. In today's lesson on the geographic conditions of the Netherlands, we're going to talk about the ocean. We use pipes to pump the water out. And I mean, nobody remembers that lesson. Nobody's engaged by it. They're falling asleep. And unfortunately, for most of us, the vast majority of the public speaking we witnessed as children was the worst public speaking ever.
I see. Yeah, no, there's definitely some bad examples in school that are presented to us. And talking about examples, I'm always curious to get to the source of wisdom. And a lot of wisdom you've probably accumulated through your own life experiences. But you maybe also have had some teachers or people that have inspired you. So who has been people that inspire you in the field of public speaking?
I'd have to say my dad initially. My dad is a very powerful storyteller, and I grew up, certainly from about the age of 11 or 12, listening to him speak on quite a regular basis. And I think that probably inspired me a little or a lot. And then later on, I got involved in sales. And of course, in sales, we would often go to sales meetings, and those the people that I worked with then really inspired me. I was like, wow, they seem so free to communicate. And then that got me reading books and listening back then to cassette tapes by people like Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Brian Tracy and Tony Robbins and Stephen Covey and all these types of people. And then I really got intrigued because Wayne Dyer, like, what an incredible storyteller. John Gray from the Mars Venus, what an incredible storyteller. And so as I started observing the way they did things, I began to, sort of model that technique. I started looking at the various techniques that people use and said, wow, that is inspiring. And plus the impact they were having, like when you become a really effective teacher, it means you can now teach 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, or 10,000 people, or 100,000 people in a single session.
Yeah, so you can increase the number of people that you impact.
Yeah.
And one of the people that you mentioned that had an influence on you is your dad. Not surprisingly, fathers often have an influence on you. And on your website, you also mentioned something like resolve the past. So why is, let's say, your dad or your childhood or your past, why do you mention that specifically on your website? And how is that probably related to public speaking?
It's incredibly related. So there's a concept that I developed, and I'm currently writing about, and I've spoken about. There's videos on YouTube and such, but it's called the hindsight window. And the hindsight window is based on an English expression. Hindsight is 20/20. In other words, when you look back at the past, you can always evaluate the past and see it more clearly. And so what I propose is that the more anger and shame and guilt and resentment that a person feels about the events of their past, the more anxiety, fear, and apprehension they will feel about their future. In other words, if the road has been bumpy so far, it's going to be bumpy in the future. On the other hand, if one can reconcile the events of their past and see them not as sharp and flat notes, but rather see them as part of the perfect symphony of your existence, then what happens is you start to be able to find gratitude for even things that were painful and difficult at the time. And the more gratitude and appreciation you have for the events of your past, the more faith you have in your future and the events of your future. And so as a speaker, this is a really big deal, because a lot of times our fear of public speaking relates to meanings that we created about things in the past. And if we can relax or release those meanings, if we can reframe those meanings, then we can actually move forward and face any audience with a higher degree of faith and optimism.
And can you share something about your own past that you had to reconcile with?
Oh, I mean, there's been some. I can give you a really good example. When I was 18 years old, somebody lit me on fire, and I was working. I was working an industrial job, and I got gasoline all over my arm. And this guy, it was a stupid joke, and he flicked the lighter and caught me on fire. And I was very lucky that my entire body didn't go up, because I had gas all over my uniform. Luckily, only the arm caught on fire. But what happened is that I now ended up having to spend 6 weeks in the hospital. I had to have skin removed from my legs to rebuild my arm. At one point they told me I would never use my hand again. It was the most unbelievably painful experience of my life. But here's the thing. I'm really grateful that it happened. I really am grateful that it happened. It gave me a depth of experience. I've been able to talk to burn victims about their recovery. I've been able to talk to children about the dangers of playing with fire, even though that isn't how it happened to me. I also developed a depth of character and understanding. And incidentally, years later, I was riding a motorcycle in Thailand, and I was riding my motorcycle to a nature reserve, and it was like an hour's drive down the highway. So we're driving very fast, an hour down the highway, and it's very, very hot. And then the bike sits in the sun for 3 hours, and then we drive all the way home. And then as I get off the bike, the tailpipe touches my leg and burns me all the way through the skin right away. And now I'm in Thailand, and I've got this very, very serious 2nd and 3rd degree burn on my leg, and I know exactly what to do. So I go straight away to a pharmacy, like 4 minutes away. I walk straight into the pharmacy, and I know to order saline solution. Of course, even the pharmacist doesn't know this, but saline solution is just the same thing people use for the contact lenses. So even though she didn't think of it as a first aid thing, I knew that from my time in the hospital with my burns. And so I was able to use the saline solution to cool the wound down, to clean it out, to get all the stuff out of it, to wrap it up, to bandage it correctly. And the very next day I was flying home. I was living in England at the time. I flew home to England, went straight to the ER when I got there. And when I got there, they told them what happened. And then they undid the dressing. And I'm not kidding you. This is exactly what they said. You were in Thailand? I said, yeah. And they go, this is the best burn dressing we have ever seen coming out of Thailand.
Wow.
I did it myself. Now, no comment on, I don't know anything about Thailand emergency procedures. It's just that's what they told me in the ER. But the point is that in many, many ways, my life was improved by that accident. Now, I wouldn't wish that accident on you. I wouldn't wish that accident on one of my children. It was incredibly painful. But today, I don't have any anger toward the guy who lit me on fire. I don't have any resentment at all. I have nothing. I have gratitude that event happened to me. I have gratitude that it wasn't worse, and I have gratitude for the richness that it added into my life.
I see. So some experience in the past are important to reconcile, but also can lead you to direction of things that you can speak about to other people, or do you have a certain authority in?
I would just simply say this, that any event in your life that causes an emotional response is innately valuable. Now, you might not see the value in the moment, but if you're having an emotional response to it, it's valuable.
That's beautiful. So if you want to look for this one talk, you can either look at your passion, as you mentioned earlier, but you can also look back, like what experiences triggered emotional responses.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes your best stories will come from there.
Yeah. I have a bit of a different question. So I've been on this road trip for 2 years. I left Amsterdam. I needed a change of scenery, and it has been very valuable. And I've kind of followed the flow of events and people that came to me. So I joined Mind Valley. Then I meet you at the screen. Now I'm interviewing you, but also there's many other examples where I kind of just follow what comes to me. And on your website, you also mentioned that you've been on a 2-year world trip at some point, and you were teaching entrepreneurship. I'm curious what that experience has brought to you.
Well, what happened for me is that I'd been living in England for about 10 years, and I sold my company, and I went through something that I would never have predicted. Of course, now it's obvious, but I wouldn't have predicted it at the time. And that was, I went through a low-grade depression. I didn't realize how many of my emotional needs were being met by the company, by my employees, by the challenge, by the success, and everything else. And so I found myself like in my apartment, kind of sad and a little depressed and not knowing what to do with my life. I had money, I had freedom, but I had no passion or no direction. I didn't know what to do. And then a friend of mine said, well, you like to travel. I go, yeah. And then he said, well, you can buy a single plane ticket from Star Alliance that can fly you all the way around the world. I was like, what? And so he showed me this app, and even back then there was this, it's even better now, but there was this app where you could put all the places you wanted to visit, and it would draw a map and it would create the route for you. And then you would just buy this one plane ticket, and then you would travel around the world. I'm going to try that. And I found out about this on Tuesday, and on Wednesday I booked the whole trip, and I left on Thursday, like that fast. And immediately, I didn't go with any project in mind. I didn't go with any mission in mind. I just went with, I needed, it's so cliched, but I needed to find myself. I needed to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I needed to figure out what was next. And so I did 6 of those trips around the world, 6 full trips around the world over a 2-year period. Mm-hmm. The first 2 of them were purely recreational, visiting family, stopping. I would stop at the Gili Islands in Indonesia and stay for a month at a time. I spent huge amounts of time in Thailand. I went to Africa. I really just observed myself out there in the world. But then what happened was one day that guy asked me to do that talk in London. And while I was on that trip, that's how I ended up becoming a business speaker. I was just on the trip, and they're like, well, why don't you go to Singapore? I was like, all right, I'll go. And so my recreational 2 years turned into a professional, launching of my speaking career.
I see. So you're kind of want to figure out what's next, and then you stumbled into this new career. And another topic you touch upon is business freedom. You had some money, you had some freedom, and business freedom is also one of the things that you've been teaching and speaking about. And people that listen to this podcast might also have a longing for more freedom. So can you share a bit about that, what it's about and what you're teaching there?
Sure. Let's start with this. I really believe that entrepreneurship at its core is the ultimate expression of personal freedom if it's practiced correctly. So the trouble is that the majority of people, the vast majority of people who become entrepreneurs don't practice it correctly. So instead of it becoming this incredible expression of freedom, it becomes something else. It becomes almost like a prison. And in fact, 4 out of 5 businesses won't make it to their 5th anniversary. So it's a very, very low success rate. But if you play the game properly, if you really understand entrepreneurship, and there's a very big difference between self-employed and entrepreneurship. If you are self-employed, then basically what you've done is you've created a job for yourself. No problem. If you stop working, the business stops, right? It's not, you don't own an entity. You don't really own a functioning, profitable entity. On the other hand, if you become a business owner, you start a company and you work your way out of that company. And one day you can stand away and look, and the company operates smoothly, whether you're there or not. Now that's real entrepreneurship. And that's ultimately what we teach at Business Freedom, is how to start a company that you can turn into an asset that supports your lifestyle. So for some people, they want to start a company, but they end up doing a lot of jobs they hate doing. Well, again, that's more self-employment. But then the next level is, what if you created a company where you got to spend 90% of your time doing what you love? That is already a huge life upgrade. Most people in the world, even today, don't get to do that. And then the next level is, what if you started a company that was operating so smoothly and profitably that you didn't even need to be there? that it was truly an asset. And that is sort of the ultimate expression of business freedom, of entrepreneurial freedom.
I see. So entrepreneurial freedom is really about creating a company where at some point you can leave and it's still a functioning entity, and then you have your freedom. But in that transition period of leaving the business, there's also some things that you need to take care of, right? You need to find a successor. You need to have important communication.
That's the process.
And since you have done all these different things, like what are your recommendations for that transition where you transition out, but the entity still functions?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is the way I look at it is that there's, in a sense, sort of 3 levels of business freedom. There's no freedom because you're first building your business and you're doing all kinds of jobs inside the business. So then the next level of freedom is where you are spending most of your time doing things that you really love. So let's talk about the first entrepreneur. The first entrepreneur starts their business, but they have to do their own accounting. They have to take out the garbage. They have to make the sales calls. They have to do the customer service. They have to do everything. So they're doing many jobs, and many of them they don't like doing. Maybe they just hate doing their own accounting work, but they're doing it. So of course, the first step is to move toward building your business in a way where you get to do what you love most of the time. So what does that mean? It means resigning from the various positions that you don't really want to be in anymore. So if you don't want to be the accountant anymore, it means getting yourself out of there. And there are some steps, like, for example, proceduralizing it, creating templates for it, developing systems for it, so that when you do hire somebody to do that job, even part-time or something, because you'll be amazed that a part-time professional bookkeeper probably does a better job of you doing it, right? And so now you bring that person in, but if you've got good templates and procedures and organization, then it's really easy to train them, and it's very easy for them to get the job done for you. And so step by step, you remove yourself from the various jobs that you don't enjoy. And then the next, and that means you've reached the first level of business freedom, where you arrive at work every day knowing that you get to, if you're a creative entrepreneur, all you're going to do is come up with new ideas, and you're going to do your writing or your performing or business planning and strategy, because that's what you want to focus on: inventing, creating. But then the next level of business freedom is where you even replace yourself, so that being at work is completely optional. And again, what does that take? It means systems, proceduralizations, templates, and it means really good training, and it means really good recruiting and hiring the right people that you can trust. And then it means making sure that they're trained to a level where you can trust them to do their job, or in the case of finally hiring somebody to manage the business, that you can really trust them to manage the business on your behalf.
I see. So there's different levels of freedom, and especially as a first-time entrepreneur, you start doing all the tasks, and step by step, you start outsourcing them, you create systems, and you make good agreements. But now you're an experienced entrepreneur, so I'm curious, when you launch a new business like Speaker Nation, for instance, do you follow the same process, or you kind of skip a few steps because you can immediately hire people and are kind of free from the beginning?
It's not that you can skip any of the steps. It's just that you can move through them more quickly.
I see.
You know, you can't skip them. You've got to do each stage. If you skip them, then you're going to create pain. In fact, I remember working with this. He actually wasn't even a client of mine. His girlfriend was a friend of mine, and we were all sitting having dinner one night, and he asked me the same question you asked me. And so he asked me what I thought he should do, and I kind of described it. And I said, well, and he was a documentary filmmaker. And I said, well, it seems to me that the first level of business freedom would be where you get to focus on making documentary films and not having to do the accounting and the day-to-day and the hiring and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, yeah. He says, I started this whole thing and now I barely ever get to be behind the camera. And I go, well, that's going to be the first step, is you move toward hiring a general manager or a managing director or somebody who can manage that business on a day-to-day basis, so you can focus your time on shooting. And I kind of described loosely how you go about doing that and so forth. Bumped into him about a year later. Funny thing happened. He goes, I'm out of business. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, and it's your fault. And I go, whoa. How is it my fault? And he goes, well, I did what you said. I hired a managing director to run the business. I gave them signing authority and got them running the business. And I went off to South America to make a documentary film. And by the time I came back, the business was over. And I said, that's not what I told you to do. I said, did you write up procedures? No. Did you create templates? No. Did you create reports, regular, weekly, and monthly report? No. So you skipped all that and you went right to hiring somebody, and then you didn't even apprentice them. And then you wonder why you went out of business. And he goes, okay, yeah, I see the problem.
So he skipped a few steps and then he was out of business. So I get your point. So you can't, as an experienced entrepreneur, you can't skip them, but you can move to them through more
Yeah,
quickly.
and of course you can hire. You know, once you understand what it is you're doing, like here's one thing. Your business needs everything proceduralized. Anything that you do in the business needs to be documented and proceduralized. That just needs to be the way it is. Now, if you're a complete startup and you don't have a lot of capital, then you're probably going to have to do most of that documentation yourself. Now, there are other ways. You could get a student to come in for work experience and interview you, and you know, and there are ways to do it that aren't very expensive. But of course, if you've got startup capital, you can go hire somebody to do that for you. But it still has to be done. It's not that you can skip the steps, it's that you can find ways to do it faster.
I see. Now that makes a lot of sense. Another question I have around public speaking. It was interesting, by the way, to touch upon this topic, because I feel for people listening, entrepreneurs, public speaking is an important topic, but also creating freedom is also an important topic, and they're also maybe connected. So public speaking, of course, is when you stay on stage and you speak to an audience. But nowadays, we also have social media where you can share videos to an audience. Yeah. Do you also consider that public speaking, or is it only when you are on stage?
Of course it is. Anytime that you are saying words that will be listened to by the public, you are public speaking.
I see. So it's also on social media. Now, I have a question around that, because I am relatively active on LinkedIn. I think once a week I try to share something, and I always share a bit personal things that I've experienced or people that I've met. But I haven't done videos yet. So what is a reason maybe to do videos, and what are some fears to overcome? And yeah.
Well, videos are more engaging than words. And one way to think of it is that if something's simply written, then the audience has to pull the ideas out of the written words. There's no emotion, there's no delivery. You know, and you're competing against so many distractions these days. A video has the full spectrum capacity of communicating with speed and tone of voice and passion and all that kind of stuff. So a video is going to be more engaging. When I created our Wild Fit program, I could have written a diet book. I knew what it took to help people transform their relationship with food and lose weight, reverse their diabetes. I knew all that. But I knew that if I wrote it as a book, that those words would never have the same power as multimedia. And so instead of writing a book, I recorded the program, and I recorded it as video. And to this day, over 50,000 people have gone through those programs in 100 countries around the world. I don't think a book would have been as effective. I just don't think so. And so the same thing now with social media. The fact is, you can write a post, and it might be like, you know, it might be somewhat engaging for somebody to read it. Hello. But what's going to be more engaging is that you actually connect with them, and that you have eye contact with them, and they hear your voice. And so videos are, in my opinion, far more effective than text only.
I see. Hello.
Yeah, we're not done. Okay.
How are you? So videos are more engaging for the reason that you can communicate emotion more easily, and you can communicate more ideas, and your audience doesn't have to analyze this. So what are some recommendations for when you use videos as a public speaking tool?
Well, there's a bunch of different ways that happens. One is that you are at an event and you're speaking to a live audience, but it's being video captured. Some of my most successful videos online are exactly like that. I was speaking at a conference somewhere, and I was speaking at a conference somewhere, and they recorded it and they put it online. There's not much I can change about that. You know, I'm actually speaking for a live audience, it gets captured. But when you're talking, say, to a camera, you know, and you're not talking to an audience, there are some differences. Like, you know, you'll probably remember from when you went through WildFit, there were times when I'd want to make a real point or what have you, and I would like lean in and look at the camera, and I would use the camera like it was a person. So there's some behavioral things that I think are different when you're making videos. Also, and this is a little more complicated, but if you're making videos for you know, for online distribution, particularly if you're expecting to go onto YouTube or something like that, then one of the things that one of the things that you want to consider is YouTube being the second largest search engine in the world, owned by the largest search engine in the world, is looking at every word that you say and transcribing your talks and turning it into search text. So one of the things you might want to do before making a video is do some SEO analysis on what people are searching for, and like, so for example, let's say I was going to do a video on releasing weight through WildFit and through changing your relationship with food. Then what I might want to do is go do some SEO research and find out what are people typing into Google? What are they looking for? And maybe they're looking for rapid weight loss, or maybe they're looking for lose weight for Christmas, or maybe they're looking for healthy holiday snacks. So now, as I'm delivering my talk, what I might do is I might say those things in the talk because I know that that gives them a better chance of coming up when people search. Like, for example, this video between you and I presume you'll put it on YouTube. It'll go on YouTube. And now if somebody types in rapid weight loss, there's a chance this video will come up because I said those words. In fact, now that I said rapid weight loss 3 times, it's and then I said healthy Christmas recipes. And so by embedding those search terms into your presentation, you increase the chances of coming up in search.
I see. So you can think about the keywords that people are looking for on YouTube. And then when you upload these videos, they become more relevant. That's fascinating. I thought about it with Google keywords, but I actually didn't think about it with YouTube because it hasn't been in my
basically the same thing.
Yeah, it hasn't been in my focus
Remember,
yet.
every talk is transcribed and turned into text, and that text is fed to Google. So there it is.
Yeah. So if you look at your different activities, like the public speaking, the Speakers Nation, the business freedom, the WildFit, they're all connected to the theme of behavioral change.
Yeah.
And that's something you're interested in. So what are some of your key takeaways within the field of behavioral change? And if people that listen to this podcast want to change a certain behavior, like where do they start or what's important?
Okay, well that's a whole interview all by itself, but I'll give some clues. One of the things that really can help people is having a very clear association to the result that they want. The way I think about this is that there are potential events in your future that are so powerfully attractive to you that if you can really push your consciousness into them and really associate to them and believe in them, then they will pull you through any challenge. And we call those things in our quantum shift program, we call those things success tableaus. It's like a single frame or a small slideshow of very specific moments that communicate your results. As an example, somebody comes in and does WildFit, and you can say, well, what is your goal? I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to feel younger, or I want to be out of pain. But what you really want to do is distill it down to a moment that they really want to experience. So for example, I was working with a client once and he says, I know what the moment is. I said, what is it? He says, I see myself on the floor playing with my grandchildren flexibly, and then standing back up again under my own power. Now, that's a far more emotional idea than losing 20 pounds. So if people can create a really strong success tableau for the new behavior they want, if they can really, while I may have created this methodology or I created this sort of thought process, it's not a new idea. I mean, Martin Luther King in his I Have a Dream speech, he describes a success tableau right in the speech. He says, I have a dream. I have a dream of little black boys and girls and little white boys and girls playing together on the streets. Like that's a very different thing than, I'm looking for social justice and equality and workspace equality. Like those are all facts, great. But that postcard for him, that picture for him was the emotional thing that was able to draw him through everything. Even as he knew they were plotting to assassinate him, he knew that. And yet he was so pulled ahead by his own vision. So that's one strategy that we think is really powerful. The opposite strategy is what we call a rock bottom tableau. And these things work really well hand in hand. And a rock bottom tableau is that same thing. It's not some esoteric, vague idea of a future that you don't want to experience. It's a specific snapshot in time of your potential future that scares you so badly that you'll change.
I see. So instead of making it practical, like I want to lose 20 kilos, you look at the ideal state in the future, or a rock bottom scenario that has a higher level of emotion connected
Yeah,
to it.
and it's not that you can't have those other sort of like specific measurable goals or whatever. Sure, I want to release this weight, or I want to. It's not that you can't have those ideas or those goals. It's that you can have those, but a very specific tableau, a very specific frame that on one side attracts you to the future you want, and on the other side repels you from the future you don't want. Those things are powerful. They'll hold you on course.
I see. Now that makes a lot of sense. So with public speaking, people can do the same. You can imagine, like, I want to give a TED talk, or I want to be on a certain stage.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a certain end goal.
Yeah, but you see, even that, like, that's still very goal oriented. Instead, it's a matter of saying to somebody, like, why do they even want to be doing that? Most people that want to do a TED talk, for example, it's not that they want to stand on a stage with the word TED on it. It's that they want to have some impact, right? There's an impact that they want to have. Like in my case, when I get on stage and I'm talking about WildFit, what I know in my heart is there are people in that audience that are right now type 2 diabetic, and I know 3 months later they won't be. And I know that 3 months later, many of them will have lost 20 or 30 pounds, or I know some of them will get rid of the pain and the inflammation that have been in their hands. I know that. And so when let's say I get up in the morning and there's stuff that could be distracting me or getting in the way, I just push myself out to that moment when I know those people are going to say those things to me. Every single day, literally every single day, I get messages on my phone from people who tell me how our programs have completely transformed their life. So those snapshots are more important to me than, I want to stand in front of 500 people at a TED talk. That's all fine and good, but to me, that's a stepping stone. Now, for someone else, standing on the stage at a TED talk is the success tableau for them, and that's okay. At whatever level of evolution they're at, that might be the thing that's drawing them forward.
I understand, but it's really more about the emotional feeling or the impact that they might want to have.
Yeah, it's whatever on the success. I'll be there soon. It's from a success tableau perspective. It's a snapshot in time that has such emotional connection for you that it will draw you through any challenges, help you overcome any obstacles. And on the rock bottom tableau, it's this snapshot in time, like, you know what? I was working with this client and we were talking a little bit about, this type of transformation and so on. And he said, I had an exact experience like that. I said, what happened? He goes, well, my daughter, who was about Zoe's age at the time, like her about 6 or 7 years old, walked up to him. He was a smoker, walked up to him and said, Daddy, I wish you'd quit smoking. And he's like, yeah, whatever. Sure. Why? And she goes, because I really want you to walk me down the aisle when I get married.
I see. So that's touching.
That was his last ever cigarette.
Yeah.
Right. In that moment. Now, it's not that moment for everybody, but it was that moment for him. He suddenly saw that. And he's like, and by the way, his rock bottom tableau was created instantly in the same moment, because I asked him, I said, well, what about a rock bottom tableau? And he goes, I saw myself watching my daughter getting married without me there.
That's touching.
There you go. Right?
That example, it makes it very clear.
Yeah.
Well, you've shared a lot of wisdom on public speaking. If someone is listening and they want to engage with you or join one of your events or retreats, can you share practically what's on the agenda?
Sure. I mean, we do 3 of our speaking academy programs a year. We try to do them around the world. So North America, Europe, and then Asia. And they can go to speakernation.com to find out about that. Plus, we have tons of free resources. And we actually currently have a free membership for people that want to go and learn a little more about public speaking and have online practice groups and all that kind of stuff. So speakernation.com is the best place to find out about that. Plus, I manage my own Instagram account. I do my very best to reply to people when they send me questions and stuff. And so if people want to connect with me on Instagram, that's great too.
Thank you for sharing that. And then my last question: in the Soul Kitchen, people can find recipes for life. And this episode is about public speaking. So if you summarize all your experience and knowledge, what is kind of the recipe for public speaking that you want to share with the listener?
I think I'd say this, that really have a thought about your life experiences and realize that even though they might not feel that valuable to you because you already have them, to somebody else, they might be infinitely valuable. And if you can begin to look at the events of your past through the value that those events can create for other people, then you may well find the message or messages that you feel most passionate about that you want to share with the world. In my case, what happened was I looked at my life and I found that I gave myself the gift of financial freedom through business. I gave myself the gift of overcoming my fears of public speaking, and I gave myself the ultimate gift, and that was a great relationship with food and a healthy body, and which is not what I was living in at the time. And the funny thing is that those things for me, they were done. I didn't think of them as valuable anymore until my friends and people around me started asking me about them. And then I realized those things, while not that valuable to me anymore, because I already solved those problems, those solutions were infinitely valuable to other people. If you can find those Rembrandts in the attic, as we call them in the Speaking Academy, if you can find those diamonds that are in your life experience and you can match them up with the right audience, you can have a really significant impact.
Well, thank you for sharing that recipe. I truly enjoyed this episode. I wish you a lot of fun and good luck on all your adventures. And maybe we see you again at Mind Valley or at your academy.
Sounds good. Thanks very much.
Have a good day, Eric. So that was it.
Good deal. Well done. Pleasure.